Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Jessica Hathaway. I'm the editor-in-chief of National Fisherman. And today I have with me fisherman David Goethel. David is a New Hampshire groundfish fisherman, a three-term former member of the New England Fishery Management Council, a member of the Yankee Fishermen's Co-op in New Hampshire, and he's also a National Fisherman Highliner and a longtime friend of the magazine. So I want to say thank you so much for joining us, David.
Yes, it's nice to be here.
Okay, so we're going to get right to it. I want to start with sort of your bird's eye view of the New England ground fishing industry today as you've seen it from the docks.
Well, I mean, it's certainly been interesting to watch what's unfolded this year. First of all, of course, there's far less ground fishermen than there used to be. There are only 6 of us left in New Hampshire. We had over 100 in 2000. And of those few people that are left, obviously the coronavirus situation has put people into a rather unique position of having to move their product. We're lucky at the co-op in that we have a fish market, and the public has responded in an amazing way, and we're selling just about everything we catch right through the market because people have realized the value of a short supply chain. They see my boat unloading and they see the fish come through another door a few minutes later, and they know it's only been handled by 2 people. And I have no way of knowing if this is going to continue as the virus, hopefully wears off later on here. But as of right now, that's our business model. We're moving our lobsters, our scallops, and our finfish pretty much all through our market. So we are lucky in that our prices aren't as good as they were last year, obviously, but they're good enough to keep people working.
Right. So that is, I definitely want to talk about the Fisherman's Co-op because I know it's been around for 30 years now. And historically, it's had the brick and mortar store, the retail store, but it's also supplied restaurants, retailers, and institutions. I mean, places that take a large volume of fish. So yeah, how have you seen that pivot working and to feed the local market?
Well, I think probably 90% of our volume went to large wholesalers. Went to Boston, New York, Montreal, Toronto. Obviously, our tuna went to Japan, a good portion of them, but also into New York. And because of the time the virus has hit, this is a low volume time of year. Lobster fishery is at a low volume. There's only were a handful of boats left with any groundfish quota to fish in March and April. And so we were able to kind of do a pivot and recover. What's going to be interesting to me is when the lobster fishery moves into the shedder season and we go from maybe having 500 pounds a day to 5,000 pounds a day, where are those lobsters going to go? I don't think we could sell them all through the market. We desperately need some return to normalcy here in the economy. I mean, lobsters are a restaurant item, obviously. Tuna is another one. The domestic tuna market, it's a restaurant market. Japan is closed still. We don't know what's going to happen when the tuna fishery opens June 1st, if you will be able to export fish to Japan. The airlines that transport the fish have pretty much shut down all international flights. We're not going to be able to afford to charter a 747 to fly a plane full of tuna to Japan, not return any money to the fishermen. So there are a lot of challenges ahead.
Yeah, without a doubt. That's a really good point, though, about the oncoming shedder season and bluefin tuna season. I did see that the co-op has yellowfin in right now. Looked really good. I was looking at the Facebook page, and I definitely recommend anyone local to check it out and go buy some fish. Yeah, Maine has ramped up some processing of Maine lobsters since they had some issues moving lobsters into Canada. What do you have for local processing down there that, you could deliver product into, maybe to be frozen and packaged for later?
We don't really have any. We have a lobster cooker. We cook lobsters, sell lobster meat in the store. We'll cook lobsters for people that come in and want to take home kind of a to-go boiled dinner. Um, so we can boil lobsters for them and sell them to them hot. But the fact is that we still need to figure out what we're going to do with all this product. You can't sell dead lobsters, as everybody knows. They're live. They're called live lobsters for a reason. We only have so much storage capacity at the co-op. We're trying to figure out how to expand our storage because we may have to hold these things for a while. But all that stuff takes money, and money is the one thing that fishermen always find to be in rather short supply.
Right. So yeah, even if your restaurants are open, a lot of those restaurants really rely on seasonal support from the tourist industry as well, which is certainly flagging around the country, and especially in New England as the summer starts to kick in. We saw some traffic here in Maine over the weekend, but certainly nothing like we would normally see on Memorial Day. So I wanted to ask you about what you're landing right now and what you're seeing for prices compared with last year.
Okay, I'm landing pretty much the same quantity of fish, actually probably more fish than I landed last year. March and April were really good because we could target haddock right off of Hampton, and the market could go through an amazing amount of haddock.
Yeah.
And probably 85% of what I caught was haddock. Now it's closed off New Hampshire. We still have the remnants of the input control system, what used to be called the rolling closures. I'm now informed they're called cod mortality closures, but they still exist. So I have to go 40 miles down off of Boston to fish in a small sliver of real estate that's open. There aren't as many haddock down there. About 25% of what I'm catching is haddock, and the rest is flounders, nice size, yellowtail mostly. But that presents a new challenge to us because New Englanders are people that like haddock and they like cod. And while filet of sole may taste exactly the same, it just doesn't have the cachet of fresh haddock. So I've been going 2 days a week to bring back enough haddock to keep the market going. And we're selling the yellowtail into the more traditional wholesale market that we've used. And I would say prices are fair at best. I mean, when you have to sell fish into a wholesale market, they can't turn around and sell those fish because everything's closed. Obviously, they can't give you the money they gave you last year. So it's presented a challenge in that, we obviously spend a lot more money for fuel. We still have to lease fish, all the sector challenges. But now we can't target what we could sell in our own facility as much. And so we're not getting the prices we got in March and April. But we are keeping the market going, and we're feeding those people that feel that getting, fish through a fresh fish market is an important part of their life.
Yeah, I mean, I love sole. I love flounder. That's one of my favorite dishes to cook at home. Although I will say, the first time I ever had it was in a restaurant, and I love eating fish out. It's definitely, I think, it's challenging for a lot of local seafood, even people who are enthusiastic about seafood, to buy fish they've never tried before, especially fish that may come whole, that they have to fillet themselves. And I hope that more people can take on that challenge. We've got a little bit more time to play around with our food at home these days, try something new. But that is an interesting point about just seeing more flounders out there and not really having as much of a market for them. These are the things that we have to work on as an industry, educating people about what's out there and what they can eat. I mean, yes, we all love a nice cod steak or haddock pieces for chowder or for, you know, fish tacos or whatever, but you know, if we can eat more of what's out there, then we have to rely less on foreign markets or other, or you know, land-based proteins, and you are supporting your neighbors at the same time. So you know, with ground fish, there are so many species out there, there's so much to try, there's so much more than that thick whitefish fillet that seems to have all the cachet.
Right. There are so many more things, and we're putting them in the market. We put pretty much everything we catch out, and people are becoming more adventurous. You know, they come in initially and they buy some ag. They come back the next week and say, well, how do you cook that monkfish over there? Or how do I do this? Or how do I do that? And we try to provide people with recipes and advice on how to cook things. We will sell people whole fish if they want it, and some people do. They want to clean their own, but mostly we're selling fillet product. We have a fish cutter come in and cut on the premises, so they buying something they can already just use as a recipe would require. But again, we're going to get to like the whiting season coming up here, where we cannot process 7,000 pounds of whiting off my boat every day. It's whole fish. It's got to be sold pretty much as whole fish. And if New York doesn't open up as a city, I don't know where that whiting's going to go. I mean, Montreal and Toronto buy some, but you know, Canada's closed too. So these are the challenges we face. And I think, you know, just on a personal basis, I'd like to say through you to NOAA Fisheries, you know, our job is to feed the American public. The NOAA Fisheries' job is to help us do that. And I'm not seeing that help. You know, I think we really need to determine what is an essential service from NOAA Fisheries and get into the weeds here a little bit and recast NOAA on, you know, how to deal with this. Because people have made it very clear, at least at the co-op, they don't want their supply chain going to China and back to get their fish. And, you know, we're still importing 90% of our product. And we have tons of product in this country. And we can't move it because we don't have the infrastructure. So I think NOAA's got to, you know, be retasked here to get on the stick.
Yeah, well, I definitely agree with that. And I know that Saltonstall Kennedy funds used to be used for marketing and product development, and they're not really used for that anymore. And it would be nice as a point of outreach to the industry and support for our commercial fishermen to see those funds being used straight up to support the industry, not just research, but products and getting products into the hands of the American public.
Absolutely. We need goal-oriented stuff, and we need short timelines. We haven't got 5 years to study this or 2 years. You know, we need solutions in a month to 6 weeks. The whiting season starts July 15th. Shedders are probably going to hit around July 1st. We haven't got much time, and you know, we're kind of sitting here, and to me, sometimes it's kind of like, you know, Nero fiddles while Rome burns. Well, Rome is on fire, and you know, I don't see the government doing anything but fiddle, honestly.
No, it's the fishermen really that I've seen who've really stepped up. Fishermen and fishing associations and co-ops like the Yankee Fishermen's Co-op. And, you know, when I first published, I was cobbling together, you know, contact information for people who are selling directly. It was the co-ops and the fishermen who reached out to me immediately. I mean, they were hot on it, and they haven't stopped from what I've seen. But that, like you said, is not going to be enough. If the markets aren't open, we need someone to come in and help us develop a supply chain that can survive a crisis.
Yeah, and I don't see this crisis going away anytime soon. I mean, when we get a vaccine sometime in the future, yes, it will abate. But it's really, I think it's changed how a number of people view the world. I think there was a certain amount of human arrogance involved here that, you know, we could develop a pill to kill anything, and we could do this and we could do that. And, here's this 4 micron wide virus. It's set everybody flat on their butt, and they can't even leave their house. They can't do anything. Their whole world has been turned upside down. And maybe because I'm older, and I remember when we didn't have vaccines. I mean, I knew kids with polio when I was in elementary school. I was quarantined for, German measles and mumps and chicken pox and all of those, because they didn't have vaccines. But it was different then. And what was different to me was the fact that they put the people that were sick in quarantine, and they let everybody else go about their business. And your neighbors brought food and left it at your door and stuff. We've done things differently this time. Good, bad, or indifferent, we've still done things different.
Yeah, without a doubt. Without a doubt, it's been a very different experience than anything I've ever seen in my lifetime, for sure. But I am of the vaccine era. My grandfather did have polio, though. I saw the long-term effects of that on a person's life, and he was lucky to be alive, to be perfectly honest. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what comes out of this. Like you were saying before, time will tell. But a lot of the decisions that we make now are really going to affect what happens later. And yes, we've been knocked around, but there are we have so many resources. We are a wealthy nation. And if we can focus on what matters and not, not just supporting the things that we've always historically propped up that we may or may not need in a time of crisis. Just as you mentioned, fishermen are an essential service. What may not be an essential service right now are some of the things that we funded traditionally. So how do we move the funding into the right hands? I just saw a survey from Salmon State out of Alaska that showed that what fishermen really want right now is for the relief funds that have been funneled into the states to go directly in the hands of the fishermen. And they would like some support to maintain health and safety guidelines. And, I think we have to listen to the fishermen, right? I hope somebody does.
Well, it would be novel if that was to occur. I mean, it's been 53 years here. I've been in the fishery, and I feel that during the vast majority of those 53 years, it's been like a voice in the wind. Sometimes you can shout into the wind, but it just blows back in your face.
Yeah, well, I want to say that I know that your voice has been loud and clear from my experience, and I know there are a lot of fishermen out there who really appreciate that you've had such a strong voice, including you filed a federal lawsuit about observer coverage a few years ago. Can you talk about the lawsuit and the results? I know as far as I know, it's not ongoing anymore. And what you're seeing as NOAA and NMFS have released or have relaxed some of the requirements for observer coverage in the groundfish fishery.
Okay, yeah, the lawsuit was concluded. We went all the way to the Supreme Court, and basically we never did get a ruling on the merits of the case. We were told by all the courts that we were what is called time barred, that we had to sue the government within 30 days of the final rule implementing sectors in 2010, instead of 30 days after they implemented fishermen paying for observers. Whether I agree with that or not, that was the ruling of the courts. The circuit court was the one that was the most interesting because they left some tantalizing hints out there that, addressed the merits of the case somewhat. And at least 2 of the 3 judges seemed to be, from where I sat, saying, if we were to rule on the merits, NOAA was in trouble. But nevertheless, this time barred argument precluded that from occurring. So the lawsuit is over. Groups have subsequently filed against the industry-funded monitoring amendment. 2 groups, Cause of Action, which represented me, and another group. Those cases are just entering the courts at the beginning stages. And again, they won't be time barred this time. These were filed within 30 days of publication of the final rule. So maybe at some point here in the future, we'll get a ruling on the merits of whether or not NOAA can tax people to pay for something that they don't want and a lot of times don't need.
Right. Okay. Well, that's exciting. I hope that you can keep us posted on that, anything that you learn, and we'll certainly try to keep that updated on the NF site and in the magazine. What do you think some of the long-term effects could be of this relaxation of requirements that NOAA is using during the pandemic?
Well, as I said, we need to determine what is truly essential in NOAA. And, they didn't do the surveys. I would argue the surveys are pretty essential. Um, I would argue that at-sea monitors are one of the least essential functions that NOAA has. Um, and so I think moving forward, at least until there's a vaccine, NOAA should really decide what is essential here. I know they keep saying in their press releases that observers are an essential function of NOAA fisheries. Well, the fisheries operated now since March 20th. I'm not aware of any changes in the fishery. Uh, to my knowledge, the handful of people that are fishing the same way they always did. They're landing the same fish they always landed. Uh, so where's the essentialness here? Um, the NEFOP coverage, that I could argue could be considered essential, but that's only 4 to 7% of the trips, and it should be 4 to 7% of all the trips. And that's never been implemented at that level. So my suggestion to NOAA would be, in the short term, eliminate the at-sea monitoring program altogether. It's useless anyway. And do the NEFOP coverage, um, and do it in such a way that every time you deploy an observer, they self-quarantine for 14 days after the trip, and then take a COVID test before they deploy on another boat. That's the only way I could see this being done safely. There is no social distancing on a boat my size. I have 2 crew. They're within 6 feet of me all the time. I don't like that, but that's the way it goes. And they are told in no uncertain terms that you will obey the rules when you're off that boat. And so far it must have worked, because we're still here, we're still fishing, and none of us have got the disease. Um, but, you can't wear a mask on a boat. Uh, you know, First of all, if you're like me and you wear glasses, your glasses steam up, you can't see a thing. It's like being in the fog bank perpetually. But the crew, they're covered with mud and blood and everything else when they get done cleaning fish. They'd be fooling with those masks all the time. It will not work. So the people that say something like, oh, we'll just wear a mask and everything will be fine. I don't know what planet they're coming from, but they obviously haven't been on a boat.
Right. Yeah, the blood, the guts, the wind, the rain, the fog, there are a lot of reasons that a mask is not very practical on a boat. I could see, for some boats like in Alaska, especially that are delivering to a tender, to wear a mask while you're delivering if you might come in close contact with them. But it does seem that overall, it just makes more sense to be self-quarantining as much as you can with your crew to keep everybody safe as a unit. So you're like a fishing pod instead of just independent crew as you might normally be. Are you crewing your boat the same way that you did last year? You have the same crew?
Yes, and the difference now is, of course, the crew really needs the job.
Yeah.
Getting crew for the last 5 or 6 years has been pretty hard because, there were jobs everywhere and not everybody wants to get up at 3:30 in the morning every day to go to work. But one of my crew worked as a chef in a restaurant. Obviously, restaurants are closed. There's no jobs as a chef. The other crewman worked on a lobster boat. Lobster boats didn't start till late because I didn't think they were going to be able to sell the product. So they needed the job, and they obeyed the rules that I set down, which were, very strict. That you were to go home and stay in your house with your significant other, and one of you a week was to go out food shopping or whatever you had to do, but you weren't to be gallivanting around town or visiting all your relatives and everything. And I think they believed it. I mean, because they needed the job. And I told them, the first person that shows up here with a cough or a fever, this boat's done for a minimum of 14 days. And it may be done for a lot longer. So it's in your best interest, if you want to keep getting a check, to follow my rules. And they have.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't disobey your rules either. You're the boss, David. Can you tell me a little bit about fuel prices and maintenance this year?
Yeah, fuel prices have dropped, but it took a while because you had to use up the fuel in the system. So most of March and April, I was still fishing under last winter's fuel prices at about 250. But the last time I got fuel, it was down to $1.29, which is really pretty remarkable, especially when you're going 40 miles a day. $1.29 is a lot better than 250. So now
Yeah.
fuel is, I guess, a bright spot out of this. Maintenance is a real problem. Uh, you cannot get supplies. A lot of the businesses that we deal with are not considered essential businesses. Every state has different rules. I mean, I tried to order stuff out of Maine from a wholesaler there. They closed their wholesale thing for quite a while. The company here, they'll deliver stuff to the outside the door, but you have to place an order. And they'll drop it off, and you leave a check in an envelope. Massachusetts, I went over there, same thing. I had to call the order in, and then I had to wear a mask to pick up the order. Masks are mandatory in Massachusetts. So something routine right now can bring one of these boats to a screeching halt. Something that I could walk into a store and pick up off a shelf and go fix my boat. You can't do that because you can't walk in and see what you need. If you don't know what it is, you're in trouble. And that's going to become a real issue here if things don't change pretty soon, because routine supplies that you need to run a boat, whether it's fuel filters or whatever,
Right.
you have a difficult time getting.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's definitely interesting to hear. What do you think, like, what would help ease some of that burden, do you think? Like, I know that it varies state by state, but just say in New Hampshire, what could you do? What would improve your access? I mean, obviously, some of these stores might not open even if they're allowed to open. So what do you think, what could we say to our representatives or whoever we need, our governors, to help with that?
Well, first of all, I'd say that anything marine related, for lack of a better word, is essential. If keeping boats running to feed the American public is essential, and those boats need certain services, those should be essential as well. Luckily I escaped the boatyard where my boat was stored for the winter just in time. If I'd have been a week later, my boat would still be sitting there because they couldn't launch boats because it wasn't considered an essential business. So, I think we need it across the states for one thing. We do need, people need to be able to go into a store. I don't have any problem with people requiring you to wear a mask to go into the store, but they need to be able to go in and look for the items they need. You can only do so much online or out of a catalog or something like that. Sometimes you just got to see it and say, no, that's just not the right size, because pictures are deceptive. Those are the types of things that sooner rather than later, I think the states are getting around to it, but too much of our stuff comes it's the same supply chain as the fish. Too much of the stuff comes from too far away, and that supply chain is broken. It's not delivering. I tried to get a head for a boat hook a month and a half ago. I haven't got it yet. One of the most simple things on the planet.
Wow.
I can't get one. So we're using a gaff to pick up the mooring. It's tough on those red balls. We're puncturing a bunch of them, but
Yeah.
we've got to put the boat on the mooring and we got to pick the ball up somehow.
Yeah.
So that's just one example, and I've literally got hundreds.
Wow, David. Well, thank you so much for that. That's really good information. And I hope that, the fishing associations that are listening and maybe any local government officials that we could reach out to could help to reopen that supply chain for our fishermen to keep their boats running this summer. That's certainly a critical and essential service. I can't even believe that is, is a question at this point. Although, no, that's not true. I can believe it. I can believe it. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, David. Is there anything else that you want to add? Any questions that you have for people who might be watching or listening or reading? Any information that you want to share?
Well, actually, there was one thing I wanted to touch on, and I think it's pretty important, is the value of a free press in this environment. Um, yeah, I read several newspapers cover to cover every day. I read a news magazine. I read a lot of the fishing publications. But there's so much misinformation out there at the moment. Um, some of it intentional, some of it unintentional. That there really is a real need now for an independent press to go out and cover stories, verify uh, truths, if you will, and put news out there that people can rely on. As an example, this morning, the internet is full of chatter about observers returning. But I haven't seen any official NOAA publication. The current waiver expires May 30th, which is a few days away. Uh, when there isn't somebody to verify that kind of information, half-truths, lies, and rumors fill the gap. So I think now more than ever, people should be supporting magazines and newspapers and, getting people like yourself out into the world to report on and verify information.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate that. I couldn't agree more. I encourage everyone to pay for subscriptions to your local paper, to magazines, to national newspapers. Like you, I read a wide variety every day. It's the only way to actually feel informed. I don't necessarily read a wide variety on every topic, but I try to pick the more controversial ones to study so I can see what's being left out of different sources. That's really the only way to get the big picture, because it's difficult. I can say as a journalist, it is difficult to get the full picture for every story, and we're strapped, like every newspaper, every magazine, every even online publications that I know, they're running on a shoestring budget. And, we're lucky to have to be part of a bigger company. But not every publication has that good fortune. And, there's not a lot of money to be made in journalism these days. Most of the people who are doing it like the Fisherman. We're doing it because we love it. And, that doesn't always, help. It helps get us
Love
out
can only
there,
go
but it
so
doesn't
far, I guess.
go.
But I mean, when you're penned up in your house the way we all have been, and you can't interact with people, at least for me, it's a real struggle. I like to read people's faces. It's like playing poker. There's the tell, and you could tell that the guy really does have four aces this time. I got to fold him, or no, he's full of crap. He doesn't have anything. I need to interact with people on a person-to-person basis. I need to see their faces. I've been opposed to the councils holding, these virtual council meetings, to holding committee meetings on computers, because you can't see all the people at once. You can see them one at a time. And so you don't know what to tell us. You don't know what's really going on in the back of that person's head. And again, that's where, to me, when the press covers something, they see everybody, so they can get a sense of the tell. And I'm still really concerned about that. I got some advisory panel meetings coming up in early June, and I'm very leery of holding meetings where we can't all sit in a room and talk to each other. And so, I don't know how that's all going to shake out, but it seems to be ironic to me that you could be considering sending observers from boat to boat to boat, a la Typhoid Mary, but you can't put 9 people in a room to have an advisor's meeting because you're too scared. Somebody's got to reconcile those two things for me.
Yeah, that's a great point. That is a great point. I know in Maine, certainly you can have gatherings of 9 people. I don't know what the rules are in New Hampshire or Massachusetts or Rhode Island or wherever else they might be holding meetings. But I think that's a fair point, and one to press the council on, why not, especially for advisory panel meetings.
Yeah,
that are
I have,
responding.
as an example, I have 9 pages of public comments written for Amendment 23 when they have public hearings. But I want to have a public hearing. I want the press present. I want to talk to the people face to face. I want to see what the other people in the room are thinking while I'm delivering my comments. Are they going, oh, he's a radical cuckoo? Or are they going, yeah, I really agree with this. He's spot on here. I don't want to deliver them to a computer screen, and I'm not going to. They'll stay in my pocket until we can have a public meeting and I can see the people that I want to have these discussions.
Yeah. Yes, eye contact does make a big difference.
Yeah, yeah. If people won't look you in the eye, then chances are they got something to hide. And you can hide behind a computer screen and never know
Yeah. Well, here we are.
it.
We're making eye contact through the computer screen, but yes, I agree. There's nothing quite like face to face. And I hope that I can see you again in person sometime soon, David. Please say hi to your wife, Ellen, for me. And I hope to talk to you again soon.
Yes, absolutely. It's been enjoyable.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.